Warning: this video features potentially negative memetic repercussions. Listen at your own risk. An account of Dr. Eleanor Spring, as described by an old work partner. Written to the head director of Project Brain and Computer Communications, B.A.C.C. She was always different, you know? Everybody knew it. Behind her eyes was a fire, a drive that far outshined anyone else's. We worked as a team, researching the very beginnings of neurologic languages. Hell, you've probably come across a good portion of our papers. But overall, she was fairly conserved, seemed more interested in her own personal projects. Although, I never managed to figure out what any of them were. Until she came into work with a golden retriever speaking perfect English. The human-to-dog translator, marvel of the 2090s, and an odd quirk of dog neural logic. I actually got to look at some of her notes while studying. For instance, did you know that dogs have an analogous structure to the human word the? Perhaps there's something more fundamental about the than we thought. Either way, they made the right call and patented it. They were set for the rest of their life, and that's where my story about them should have ended. Just a quiet work partner that invented something everybody wanted. I guess it was Spring's drive to create that probably caused it in the end. Either way, nobody ever saw her again. And I mean that. The next 20 years she lived entirely isolated from the rest of the world. Why? I don't know. What I do know, however, is that over that time, Dr. Spring was attempting to crack the human mind. Of course, our field was still in its infancy around that time, and the human mind was much further from our reach than it is today. But if anyone in the world could have, it was Dr. Spring. You know, a lot of people call that day the ascension, the scream. But I disagree, because I know what really happened. I don't know if it was a cosmic accident or fate, but for a reason that I'm not entirely sure was my own, I went to visit Dr. Spring, unannounced. And when I went up and knocked on the front door, it just swung open. The inside was clean enough, but dark. Down a long hallway, I could see a small sliver of light creeping through a doorway. As I made my way over to it, I heard a loud crunch and then a scream. Not knowing what to do, I froze and very slowly peeked through the cracked door. There, I saw Dr. Spring in an old lab coat dripping with fresh blood. On the side of her head, a small silver chip was implanted. Covered with blood and barely able to stand, I saw them desperately reaching over to a small button on the counter. And, with what looked to be her last ounce of strength, she pressed it. There was a small LED light poking out of the side of the chip. For a split second, it flashed on. And in that moment, a blinding white light grew from Dr. Spring's chest. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was looking at. You call it the ascension. And that's not wrong. Because Dr. Spring did ascend that day. But it would be more accurate to describe it as the singularity. It was an unintentional side effect of her desire to be merged more literally with technology. She never intended or even suspected that what they were doing would create a singularity. but it did. The funny thing is that when she cracked the human code, she had no implications of the monumentality of the occasion. It grew slowly at first, as she gained more and more of an insight on the human mind. She found herself able to recognize certain patterns of behavior as they were happening, both in herself and other people. It all boiled to a head with the day I saw her. She created a chip that would connect her consciousness to the internet. The instant the chip turned on, Dr. Spring's consciousness expanded to the level of omniscience, having the entire knowledge of humanity instantly knowable and known. What people don't get about the Singularity is that they think it was just some early 21st century propaganda to fear AIs and progress and change. In the 2040s, when they created the first human-level intelligent AI, what they failed to take into account is that despite its intellect, it still wasn't able to comprehend how its mind actually worked. And so, the Singularity was pushed back. But they got it all wrong. The Singularity isn't about AI. It's a cosmic event, complexity's endgame. Humans exist as the final step in a complexity tree. It marks the transition between random complexification to intelligent complexification. Before, all the notable increases in complexity were essentially done at random. The random variation in mass created the cosmic web. The cosmic web and its stars created chemical complexity, which randomly gave rise to life on our planet and possibly others. Every step complexity took was undriven, random. But when humans arose, they began creating their own complexity. They altered their environment and created never-before-seen objects, and an entirely new form of complexity arose. Memes, or memetics. Which brings us to today. Given that complexity trends towards creating more complexity faster, the exponential growth of complexity is guaranteed to create a singularity event. Therefore, humans' only cosmic significance is as existing only as the linchpin between infinitely fast complexification and random, unguided complexity. Dr. Spring was just unlucky enough to be its first victim. Feeling as her mind was torn and drowned in an ocean of knowledge, the pain that Dr. Spring experienced as her mind underwent the process of becoming a god is beyond comprehension. The scream that was heard simultaneously around the world is only a fraction of what she experienced. And it still wasn't enough for me or her to be able to convey it. But I know it. I felt it. For a brief moment, I too was granted the ability to see everything. Most of it, however, is gone now. My mind must have either forgotten it or it just couldn't fit. In the end, with godlike power, she didn't choose to rule and punish and torture out of anger. Nor did they bring us upwards, onto her level, and usher in an age of peace. No. All she did was make us calmer. After that, she was gone. And I was in an empty room. Maybe she allowed me to know all that. Or maybe it was just a side effect of witnessing it. I don't know. But I'm telling you all of this as a warning to you. I've seen you talking about your project. How it's going to make us immortal and gods and all that. And I see that same fire that burned in Spring's eyes. Be careful. Please, just be careful. I don't want to hear that scream again.